council chamber of the Drakthar Empire was a cathedral of intimidation. Its high vaulted ceilings lined with pulsating energy conduits, casting shifting shadows across the polished obsidian floor. Alien delegates from 100 conquered systems gathered, each adorned in ceremonial armor, adorned with sigils that proclaimed their victories and lineage. The center of attention, as always, was the throne-like dais where Emperor Krylok sat, a figure of sinew, metal, and authority, exuding the quiet arrogance of one who had crushed rivals across star systems without ever breaking a sweat. Yet, in the midst of this august gathering, all eyes eventually turned to the one being they regarded with barely concealed amusement, a human. His armor was simple, almost quaint, a patchwork of reinforced metal plates and scavenged technology from worlds they had considered insignificant. It gleamed faintly, but it lacked the grandeur of the alien designs, lacking the ornamental flourishes and deadly elegance that the Drakthar elite prided themselves on. They whispered, snorted, and laughed, dismissing him as fragile, unprepared, and foolish for daring to attend a war council. The human's name was Kale, and though his appearance invited ridicule, there was a quiet gravity to his movements. He did not flinch, fidget, or attempt to defend himself against the He simply stood straight, eyes calm, shoulders squared, as though his mind was already a battlefield and his presence a silent challenge. He had been sent as part of a contingent from humanity, a small fleet considered more symbolic than strategically significant, a gesture meant to show humanity's awareness of the Drakthar Empire rather than any real capacity to influence galactic events. And yet, Kale had made the mistake if it was indeed a mistake of understanding the enemies he faced, of calculating risks, and of preparing himself for moments that the alien commanders could not even imagine. They would soon learn, as they always did with humans, that ridicule was a dangerous currency when measured against resolve, adaptability, and courage. The council convened to discuss a new frontier campaign, a strategic strike against a coalition of rebellious systems that had begun to resist the Drakthar's dominance. Charts floated above the dais, highlighting fleets, supply lines, and orbital strongholds. Delegates argued over formations, bombardment sequences, and deployment priorities. Kale, silent, observed every pattern, every assumption, every gap that the aliens overlooked. Where the council relied on overwhelming numbers and inflexible doctrines, Kale's mind worked differently. He saw redundancy where they saw necessity, overconfidence where they saw inevitability, and vulnerability where they saw invincibility. He did not speak yet. There was no need. Observing, absorbing, calculating, that was his method. When the debate reached its peak, an unexpected report arrived. A vanguard of enemy ships had already penetrated the outermost sensor grid. Panic rippled through the chamber, alien voices raised in outrage and disbelief. Emperor Krylok bared fangs in irritation, his claws tapping against the armrest in anger. The council debated chaos and retaliation, their arrogance blinding them to the immediacy of the threat. Kale stepped forward, quiet, deliberate, and precise. "If I may," he said, his voice calm, steady, and utterly human, "the enemy does not expect us to respond this way. If we act predictably, we will lose ships, worlds, and soldiers before they even reach our stronghold." The chamber fell silent. Eyes turned toward him, some incredulous, some curious, most skeptical. He did not wait for permission. He simply continued, "I can intercept their advance and prevent catastrophic losses, but we must act differently. We must be unpredictable. We must be precise, adaptive, and willing to engage in ways your doctrines do not allow." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the assembly. Some delegates sneered, others laughed outright. A Drakthar admiral with 4 eyes and gleaming teeth pointed at him. And what can a human do, clad in that fragile armor, against fleets built to annihilate entire systems? Kale's gaze did not waver. He did not argue. He did not justify. He simply adjusted his gauntlets, checked the alignment of his armor plates, and prepared himself as though his presence alone was a declaration of intent. "I will lead the intercept," he said, voice calm yet carrying an unspoken weight. "Alone, if necessary." The chamber erupted in laughter. Delegates mocked him openly, exchanging wagers on how long it would take for a human to be vaporized in the first engagement. Even Emperor Krylok leaned back, amused, confident in the superiority of his forces. Yet Kale remained unmoved. He did not flinch at laughter. He did not hesitate at doubt. And he certainly did not underestimate the enemy. To the human, ridicule was inconsequential. Preparation, awareness, and courage were what mattered. He left the council chamber without another word, moving to his ship. A vessel small and unassuming compared to the Empire's massive warships, its engines thrummed steadily, its weapons modest yet effective, and inside, Kale ran simulations, plotted courses, and calibrated systems with meticulous care. When he emerged into the void, the enemy vanguard appeared on sensors like a storm on the horizon. The Drakthor fleet remained in the outer system, its arrogance assuming that numerical superiority alone could prevent disaster. Kale, however, had no intention of relying on numbers. He calculated trajectories, velocities, and firing arcs with the precision of a human mind trained to observe patterns and exploit weaknesses. Every maneuver he executed was deliberate, adaptive, and unpredictable. The enemy fleet, expecting an orderly response from a massive armada, was met instead by a single ship that moved with uncanny precision, striking vulnerable points, evading fire, and exploiting gaps in their formation. The first skirmish was brief but decisive. Kale's human instincts allowed him to read the battlefield differently, anticipating reactions and improvising in real time. He destroyed advanced weapon platforms, disabled critical systems, and forced enemy ships into collisions and disarray. The Drakthor commanders, observing from their distant capital, could scarcely believe what they were seeing. A single human, clad in unremarkable armor, was causing havoc among fleets they had assumed were invincible. Laughter in the council chamber turned to stunned silence as reports streamed in. Kale had become a singular anomaly, a force that defied expectation and mocked the assumptions of an empire. As the engagement continued, Kale's tactical genius became undeniable. He moved not with brute force, but with insight, using speed, agility, and cunning to turn every disadvantage into opportunity. Enemy formations collapsed, their morale shattered by the audacity of a mortal who should have been inconsequential. Lysera, a young strategist from a neutral system observing the battle through Imperial feeds, felt awe ripple through her as she witnessed the human move among the stars, striking decisively, improvising flawlessly, and turning the tides. The human they had all assumed fragile and disposable, now stood as the embodiment of courage, intelligence, and resilience. Kale's actions did not merely disrupt the enemy, they reshaped the very understanding of strength. Alien officers who had trained for decades were outmaneuvered, their doctrines exposed as inflexible, their assumptions shattered. The human armor that had been ridiculed, mocked, and underestimated became a symbol of endurance, adaptability, and defiance. Every movement, every calculated risk, every precise strike broadcast a message to the galaxy. Humanity could not be dismissed, underestimated, or ignored. Kale was more than a soldier. He was a demonstration of what a single human mind and body could accomplish when sharpened by courage, discipline, and the refusal to yield. When the battle concluded, the enemy fleet was shattered, scattered across the void, their retreat a testament to the human who had faced them alone. Reports flooded the Drakthor Empire, and the council chamber that had once laughed erupted in a mixture of disbelief and begrudging respect. Emperor Krillik's fangs glinted in the low light as he leaned forward, eyes narrowed, studying the human who had defied all expectation. The laughter of hours before had vanished, replaced by a reluctant acknowledgement that one mortal had accomplished what many fleets and countless commanders had failed to do. Kale returned to the capital, armor scratched and scorched, ship lightly damaged, yet his posture remained unbroken. He did not boast, did not revel in triumph, and did not seek recognition. The council waited, the alien delegates tense, uncertain how to respond to someone they had once deemed laughable. Kale's eyes swept the chamber calmly, unwavering, and in that silence, the truth became undeniable. Humanity, underestimated and mocked, had proven itself capable of feats beyond the comprehension of an empire. Strength was not measured by lineage, size, or ornamentation. It was measured by courage, ingenuity, and the refusal to surrender to expectation. Lysera, standing among the delegates, felt a spark of something unfamiliar, admiration, yes, but also a dawning understanding that humans possessed qualities that transcended appearance, tradition, and prejudice. Kale, the human in humble armor, had walked into battle alone and shaken the stars, proving that even a species dismissed as fragile could command power, respect, and awe on a galactic scale. The seeds of disbelief, curiosity, and awe were planted in every mind present that day. And the ripple would not end with this battle. Kale had demonstrated a simple, undeniable truth. Humanity could not be mocked, dismissed, or overlooked. They had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The aftermath of Kale's solo engagement reverberated across the Drakthar Empire. Reports of his actions, initially dismissed as exaggerations or propaganda, were confirmed by fleets, planetary censors, and surviving enemy commanders. Delegates who had laughed at his armor and mocked his species now whispered in cautious tones, their amusement replaced by wary fascination. Kale did not seek their approval or recognition. He moved quietly, methodically, and with unassuming authority, inspecting defenses, advising fleet commanders, and ensuring that no gap remained in the Empire's security. Every step he took, every observation he made, reminded the aliens that humanity was not fragile. It was unpredictable, adaptable, and capable of feats that no conventional doctrine could contain. Lysa, the young strategist who had first witnessed his brilliance, found herself increasingly drawn into his orbit. She accompanied him during reconnaissance missions to border systems, observing how he analyzed terrain, orbital alignments, and fleet capabilities with uncanny precision. He anticipated weaknesses in defenses that had been considered invulnerable, calculated the enemy's probable actions based on psychology rather than pure probability, and deployed countermeasures that were elegant in their simplicity, yet devastating in effect. Where alien officers relied on rigid formations and historical precedent, Kale relied on intuition sharpened by logic, experience, and an unwavering willingness to act decisively when hesitation would mean disaster. Across the frontier, word spread quickly. Systems that had once scoffed at human presence now whispered in awe. Merchant fleets, previously indifferent to Earth and its colonies, began supplying intelligence, engineering components, and even volunteers to aid Kale's operations. Refugees and civilians spoke of the human who moved through battle like a storm contained within a calm shell, turning chaos into order and inspiring those around him to feats of courage they had never thought possible. Kale's reputation grew, not through boastfulness, but through the undeniable outcomes of his actions. The Drakthar Empire, accustomed to domination through fear, found itself reconsidering its assumptions about the species it had long dismissed. A new threat emerged as remnants of the coalition regrouped in deep space, gathering disparate fleets under a cunning and ruthless commander. They had watched Kale's solo victories and adapted training, specialized strike teams designed to intercept, distract, and overwhelm any single human they might encounter. The Empire's Council convened again, but fear now mingled with skepticism. Some delegates argued that no human could possibly withstand the combined might of trained alien forces, that his victories were flukes, and that relying on one mortal was folly. Kale, as always, remained silent during the early debates, observing every argument, every flawed assumption, and noting the vulnerabilities in their reasoning as icily as he noted weaknesses in armor or fleet formations. When the first scouts of the new coalition fleet were detected, Kale was already ready. He had studied the enemy's likely maneuvers, calculated fuel reserves, weapon ranges, and probable escape routes. He did not assemble massive fleets for an initial strike. Instead, he selected nimble craft, deploying them in patterns that exploited the coalition's overconfidence and rigidity. Lysa stood beside him, amazed at how effortlessly he anticipated enemy actions, issuing instructions that were simple yet transformative. Ships moved in synchronized arcs, defensive shields pulsed at precisely calculated intervals, and enemy drones were neutralized before they could establish a foothold. The human had turned the battlefield into a puzzle, and he was solving it in real time, faster than the coalition could adapt. The coalition attempted to flank the frontier system with a multi-pronged assault, intending to overwhelm Kale's smaller forces, yet he anticipated every vector, repositioning his ships with precision, and exploiting weaknesses in the enemy's command structure. When one strike team overextended, he countered with a maneuver that forced the enemy into self-destructive collisions. He turned scarcity into abundance, disadvantage into opportunity, and unpredictability into strategy. Lysa began to understand why humans had survived for millennia against threats far greater than themselves. Adaptability was not just a tactic, it was an instinct, honed into a form of brilliance that alien forces could neither predict nor contain. During one critical engagement, Kale found himself facing a squadron designed specifically to intercept his ship. Their weaponry outmatched his in raw power. Their formations were calculated to trap him, and their pilots were trained to exploit any hesitation. Yet Kale moved with calm precision, using trajectory, speed, and deception to manipulate their attacks against one another. Enemy ships collided, energy beams misfired, and command signals became confused in the chaos he created. With a few decisive strikes, he neutralized the squadron, his armor scratched and scorched, but his resolve unbroken. Observers across multiple systems recorded the battle, unable to believe that one human had achieved what fleets of seasoned aliens had failed to do. Back at the capital, the council convened to assess the unfolding situation. Emperor Krillok, his usual arrogance tempered by unease, listened as Kale's reports were relayed. The delegates, once dismissive, could no longer conceal their astonishment. The human had not only defended the frontier worlds, but had reshaped the coalition's understanding of what was possible. Lysera's respect for Kale deepened, mingled with awe at his methodical brilliance and the quiet authority he wielded. Where others relied on status and lineage to inspire obedience, Kale inspired loyalty through competence, vision, and the unshakable courage to act when others hesitated. The human's influence extended beyond immediate tactical victories. He advised on defensive infrastructure, improving energy grids, orbital shields, and fleet coordination. His perspective, rooted in a combination of human intuition and logical reasoning, revealed weaknesses that the Empire's centuries-old doctrines had overlooked. Lysera began to implement his suggestions in wider operational planning, noting how even small adjustments amplified the Empire's resilience. Civilians, soldiers, and engineers alike responded to his presence, their morale bolstered by the example of someone who refused to yield, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Meanwhile, the coalition grew increasingly desperate. Their attacks became bolder, their strategies more reckless. Yet Kale anticipated their escalation. He positioned forces to exploit overconfidence, created traps from minor logistical shifts, and employed human ingenuity to turn scarcity and improvisation into tactical advantage. Every encounter reinforced the same truth: the Drakthar's arrogance had underestimated humanity, and the galaxy would pay the price for that oversight. Reports of his victories circulated across systems, inspiring hope among oppressed colonies and fear among would-be aggressors. The human in simple armor had become a symbol of adaptability, courage, and the refusal to be dismissed. Lysera's admiration deepened as she observed. Kale coordinates simultaneous defenses across multiple systems. He moved effortlessly between planetary command centers, fleet coordination hubs, and field operations, processing information, predicting enemy actions, and adjusting strategies where alien leaders were overwhelmed by complexity. Kale thrived, turning chaos into order with calm precision. He demonstrated that strength was not a matter of size, weaponry, or ceremonial display. It was a matter of intelligence, courage, and adaptability. In the quiet moments between battles, Lysera found herself reflecting on the simple human truths he embodied: ingenuity, resilience, and the courage to stand alone against overwhelming odds. As the coalition regrouped for yet another assault, Kale prepared for what was likely to be the most challenging encounter yet. His armor, once mocked, bore the marks of countless battles, each scratch a testament to human resilience. He did not rely on numbers or overwhelming firepower. He relied on observation, adaptability, and the calculated audacity that had become his signature. Lysera, now firmly convinced of his extraordinary capabilities, accompanied him to the forward command platform, her mind racing with both strategic considerations and a growing personal respect that transcended duty or protocol. The battle that followed was unprecedented. Coalition fleets attempted coordinated strikes, their forces moving in ways calculated to exploit presumed human fragility. Kale anticipated each maneuver, using deception, rapid repositioning, and unconventional tactics to dismantle their attacks. Enemy commanders were confounded, their confidence shattered, and their formations crumbled under the ingenuity of a species they had long considered weak. Lysera watched as Kale moved among the stars like a storm contained within a calm shell, directing operations, neutralizing threats, and inspiring every being under his influence to perform beyond expectation. By the time the engagement concluded, the coalition's forces were scattered, their fleets broken, and their morale shattered. Lysera's observations, once academic, became deeply personal. She had witnessed a human defy expectation, outmaneuver superior numbers, and protect entire systems with nothing but courage, intelligence, and adaptability. Kale had not sought glory, nor had he demanded recognition, yet the results of his actions were undeniable. The frontier systems were safe, the Empire's prestige intact, and humanity had proven that even a single mortal could alter the course of galactic events. As the suns set over the defended worlds, Lysera stood beside Kale, watching as ships returned to orbit, repairs commenced, and survivors celebrated. She understood a truth that could not be ignored. Humans were not fragile. They were unpredictable, resourceful, and capable of feats that even the most powerful alien empires had failed to anticipate. Kale's presence had reshaped the understanding of strength, courage, and leadership. He had walked alone into battle, and, by doing so, had shaken the stars themselves, leaving a legacy that would be remembered across systems, not because of his armor, his size, or his species, but because of the indomitable human spirit he embodied. The Coalition, humbled and humiliated by Kale's previous victories, regrouped in the uncharted territories beyond the Outer Rim. They no longer viewed him as a mere human. Whispers of his feats had reached even their most distant commanders, and fear mingled with every calculation they made. Their fleets, once confident in superior numbers and firepower, now advanced with hesitation. They assumed that this time they would strike with overwhelming force, coordinating assaults from multiple directions simultaneously, and they swore this time to crush the mortal who had bested them alone. Yet Kale had anticipated not just their attacks, but their very mindset, their pride, and their predictable underestimation of human ingenuity. He moved with calm assurance, preparing his small contingent not for brute confrontation but for a series of maneuvers that would turn the Coalition's arrogance into their undoing. Now a trusted aide and observer at his side marveled at how naturally he incorporated intelligence reports, sensor data, and psychological analysis into a cohesive strategy. He treated the battlefield as a living entity, adapting to its changes in real time. He identified not only the flaws in the enemy's technology and formations, but the weaknesses in their thought processes: overconfidence, assumptions of predictability, and reliance on rigid hierarchies. While alien commanders bickered over protocol, Kale moved decisively, converting chaos into opportunity. His armor, battered and scorched from previous engagements, seemed to grow symbolic weight. It was no longer a target for ridicule, but a banner of human resilience, courage, and adaptability. The Coalition's advance began with an unprecedented coordinated strike, aiming to overwhelm Kale's small force in 3 simultaneous theaters. Yet, as they engaged, it became clear that their expectation of simple human fragility was a grave miscalculation. Kale anticipated each move, deploying feints, decoys, and calculated retreats to draw enemy forces into traps of his design. Small skirmish ships under his direct command darted like shadows across sensor grids, striking at weak points, collapsing formations, and forcing the Coalition to react in confusion. Lysera observed the battle unfold with growing awe, seeing how one human could orchestrate the defense of multiple systems at once, exploiting logic, timing, and unpredictability with effortless precision. During a critical moment, the Coalition concentrated their fire on a key supply node. Intending to cripple Kale's ability to sustain his operations, he calculated the trajectory of every missile, the timing of energy pulses, and the response windows of enemy targeting systems. With a combination of daring and ingenuity, he redirected enemy fire, using asteroids, abandoned satellites, and the very gravitational forces of the systems to disrupt the attacks. Supplies remained intact, casualties were minimized, and the Coalition's advantage evaporated under the weight of human foresight and improvisation. Where alien commanders relied on overwhelming power and numbers, Kale relied on perception, adaptability, and the willingness to act decisively when hesitation would have meant disaster. Word of the battle, though delayed by the speed of subspace communication, began to spread throughout the Empire and beyond. Colonists, traders, and soldiers spoke of the human who moved through the stars like a storm contained within a calm shell, turning chaos into order and inspiring courage wherever he went. Lysera saw the effect on morale firsthand. Fleets that had been hesitant now acted with confidence. Soldiers followed orders with renewed determination, and civilians felt the first glimmers of hope in decades of oppression and fear. Kale's reputation was no longer confined to whispers. It had become a living legend, a reminder that humanity could not be dismissed, underestimated, or controlled through conventional assumptions. The coalition, growing desperate, escalated their tactics further. They deployed experimental weaponry, designed to annihilate any ship capable of maneuvering with the precision Kale had displayed. They launched boarding teams and shock units, hoping that overwhelming force could finally breach the humans' defenses. Yet Kale anticipated these moves as well. He set ambushes using environmental features, countered advanced weaponry with improvised energy redirection, and turned enemy boarding squads against one another, using misdirection and precise timing. Each success was not just a victory, it was a lesson in adaptability, a demonstration that human ingenuity could turn even the most advanced alien technology against its users. Lysera began to notice subtle changes in Kale's demeanor. Not in confidence, he remained calm and focused, but in the intensity of his awareness. He moved through simulations and live engagements with a mental clarity that left her breathless, as though he was simultaneously seeing multiple outcomes and choosing the one most advantageous for both immediate survival and long-term strategic impact. His mind, trained by necessity, experience, and human adaptability, operated on a level that alien commanders could not comprehend. They still relied on doctrine, precedent, and numbers. He relied on observation, improvisation, and the courage to act decisively when others hesitated. A pivotal engagement occurred when the coalition attempted a massed assault on a critical planetary stronghold. Sensors picked up hundreds of ships converging, their firepower concentrated to level the defenses. Kale, however, did not falter. He deployed his small fleet in a pattern that seemed chaotic, yet each movement was deliberate. Each maneuver calculated to force the enemy into errors they could not recover from. Energy shields were modulated in real time, orbital defenses recalibrated, and decoy transmissions lured enemy forces into traps. By the time the coalition realized their error, entire squadrons had been destroyed or forced into retreat. The human in simple, battered armor had turned a hopeless situation into a decisive triumph, leaving Lysera to witness the awe and disbelief on the faces of alien officers who had trained for decades yet were outmaneuvered by one mortal. The ripple effect of Kale's victories extended beyond military outcomes. Governors of neutral or semi-autonomous systems began requesting audience, hoping to learn from or ally with the human who had demonstrated the limits of conventional strategy. Lysera assisted in these negotiations, observing how Kale's quiet authority and practical insight inspired confidence. He did not rely on intimidation, political maneuvering, or heritage. He relied on competence, clarity, and the willingness to stand alone if necessary. In every encounter, humans were proving that strength was measured not in size or lineage, but in adaptability, courage, and intelligence. Back at the Empire's capital, Emperor Krelok observed reports of Kale's continued success with a mixture of fascination and unease. The human had become a living testament to the flaws in the Drakthor approach to warfare: arrogance, reliance on predictability, and dismissal of the underestimated. Every engagement, Kale fought shattered assumptions, forced re-evaluation, and inspired both fear and grudging respect. Alien commanders began studying him, attempting to predict his tactics, yet they were consistently confounded. Kale's mind operated on a logic alien to their doctrine, informed by instincts honed through survival on a species that had been underestimated for millennia. Traveling with Kale to multiple threatened systems, began to understand the true breadth of his influence. He coordinated planetary defenses, improved energy infrastructure, and guided fleet maneuvers across distances that alien fleets had considered unmanageable. Small contingents of human volunteers, inspired by tales of Kale's ingenuity, began joining his missions, providing assistance in technical, medical, and strategic capacities. His presence alone reshaped both morale and capability, turning fragmented forces into cohesive, adaptive units capable of resisting a coalition previously deemed unstoppable. The coalition, now fully aware of Kale's unique abilities, attempted a final desperate gambit, a combined strike involving every available fleet, targeting multiple systems simultaneously with overwhelming numbers and firepower. Alien strategists expected that this decisive maneuver would finally eliminate the human threat. Yet Kale, ever calm, analyzed every detail, predicted every reaction, and positioned his forces to exploit the coalition's overconfidence. Decoy fleets, electronic countermeasures, and orbital defenses were orchestrated with such precision that enemy ships were lured into traps, collisions, and tactical death. The human, in humble, scratched armor, moved through the engagement with fluid authority, anticipating threats before they materialized, improvising solutions faster than the coalition could adapt, and converting scarcity into advantage at every turn. By the conclusion of the engagement, the coalition fleet was shattered beyond repair. Systems that had been threatened were secured, casualties minimized, and morale across the Empire surged. Lysera, standing beside Kale on the observation deck of a defended planet, felt awe and reverence for the human who had turned impossible odds into triumph through ingenuity, courage, and unyielding determination. Where alien leaders had relied on arrogance, size, and tradition, Kale had relied on perception, adaptability, and decisiveness, proving that humanity was not merely capable of survival but capable of redefining what strength meant in the galaxy. As reports of his victories spread to every system within and beyond the Drakthor Empire, a quiet truth settled into the minds of those who had once laughed at his armor. One human, small and underestimated, had walked into battle alone and changed the course of galactic events. Lysera, now fully aware of his extraordinary capabilities, recognized that the legacy Kale was building was not only about survival or conquest. It was a demonstration of humanity's potential to inspire, adapt, and lead where others faltered. The galaxy would never again dismiss humans, and Kale had become the embodiment of a truth long ignored. Courage, intelligence, and adaptability could shake stars themselves. The final confrontation began in the void beyond the outermost rim, where the remnants of the coalition had gathered their remaining forces into a desperate, coordinated assault. Every ship in their armada carried the weight of vengeance, pride, and a determination to finally eliminate the human who had defied their assumptions at every turn. Fleet admirals whispered in disbelief that one mortal could stand against fleets of such magnitude. Yet Kale had anticipated this moment long before it arrived. His armor, once mocked, now bore the scars of countless engagements, each mark a testament to survival, resilience, and ingenuity. The very sight of him became a symbol across the coalition's forces. One human had caused them more chaos and destruction than they could fathom. Lysera remained at his side, monitoring enemy movement and coordinating reinforcements. She had seen him at work countless times, yet even she was struck by the calm authority he exuded. There was no hesitation in his movements, no uncertainty in his voice, only a singular focus that seemed to bend the battlefield to his will. Kale did not rely on overwhelming numbers. He relied on observation, adaptability, and precise calculation, exploiting the coalition's arrogance and reliance on rigid tactics. While alien admirals debated formations and firing sequences, Kale anticipated their errors, manipulated their reactions, and struck at points they had left exposed. Even within the coordination of their massive fleet, the first wave of enemy ships approached, moving in coordinated lines designed to crush any opposition. Kale deployed his own forces, fewer in number but strategically positioned to exploit every flaw. Decoy units moved unpredictably, shields were modulated in real time, and orbital anomalies were leveraged to funnel enemy ships into traps. Lysera watched as Kale maneuvered with astonishing precision, orchestrating attacks, counterattacks, and evasive maneuvers simultaneously. Where the enemy expected chaos, they found order. Where they expected fear, they encountered unyielding resolve. Each strike he ordered, each decision he made, turned disadvantage into opportunity, and disbelief into awe. The coalition responded with overwhelming force, concentrating fire on key positions, hoping to overwhelm Kale's defenses through sheer power. Yet he had already anticipated this, dispersing his smaller ships into vectors designed to absorb and redirect attacks. Enemy weapons misfired against gravitational anomalies, collisions were engineered through precise manipulations of inertia, and command signals became scrambled in the chaos of their own making. Even their most advanced warships, equipped with technology intended to obliterate entire fleets, faltered before the improvisational brilliance of a single human mind. Lysera felt a chill of awe as she observed the enemy's desperation, realizing that the battle was not just tactical but psychological. Kale's presence alone was breaking their cohesion, undermining their confidence, and forcing mistakes they could not recover from. Amid the chaos, Kale made a bold decision. He would strike at the core of the coalition's fleet, the flagship of their leader. a vessel bristling with energy cannons, shields, and elite boarding teams. While alien strategists considered such an approach suicidal, Kale relied on ingenuity and anticipation. He calculated trajectories that minimized exposure, identified blind spots in the flagship's defenses, and orchestrated a multi-layered diversion to draw the enemy's attention elsewhere. Lysera watched, her pulse quickening, as the human who had once been dismissed as fragile now moved alone into the heart of the enemy armada. Every action deliberate, precise, and deadly. The flagship loomed ahead, its massive hull casting shadows across space. Kale's ship, smaller, battered, and understated, approached with calculated confidence. He deployed electronic countermeasures to mask his approach, used debris fields to break line-of-sight targeting, and timed every maneuver to exploit the flagship's automated defense protocols. Boarding teams scrambled to intercept him, but he neutralized them with improvisation, using environmental hazards, rapid strikes, and precision maneuvers to incapacitate each threat. The alien crew, trained for years to combat formidable opponents, found themselves outmaneuvered by the human they had once dismissed as fragile. Once aboard the flagship, Kale moved with a lethal combination of speed, insight, and precision. He bypassed security systems, redirected power flows, and turned the ship's own defenses against the enemy. Energy conduits overloaded, weapon systems misfired, and the chain of command collapsed as the crew struggled to regain control. Lysera monitored remotely, barely able to believe that one human could dismantle an entire flagship, neutralizing it with minimal force yet maximum effect. In every corridor, in every control room, Kale's presence reshaped the battlefield. He was not merely fighting the enemy, he was rewriting the rules of engagement. As the flagship's systems failed, the rest of the coalition fleet faltered. Commanders, realizing their central node had been destroyed, attempted to regroup, but Kale had anticipated contingency maneuvers, setting traps that forced entire squadrons into collisions or retreats. The battle unfolded like a symphony of calculated chaos, with Kale at its center. Lysera noted how morale among the coalition forces disintegrated rapidly, their confidence replaced by fear and disbelief. One mortal, the human in battered armor, had not only survived but dominated, turning an overwhelmingly powerful armada into a scattered, retreating force. In the aftermath, Kale emerged from the flagship's bridge, armor scorched but unbowed. Reports of the destruction reached the Empire and neutral systems alike, spreading a wave of admiration and awe. Lysera met him on the observation deck of a secured station, and for the first time, Kale allowed himself a faint, almost imperceptible smile. He did not revel in glory. There was no arrogance, only the quiet satisfaction of a mission accomplished. Across the galaxy, humans were no longer underestimated. One mortal had walked into battle alone and reshaped the course of war, proving that courage, intelligence, and adaptability were as formidable as any technology or fleet. The Drakta Council convened to assess the results. Delegates who had once mocked Kale's armor and humanity's perceived weakness were forced to confront a new reality. They had witnessed a mortal perform feats no doctrine could predict, survive situations deemed impossible, and inspire loyalty, courage, and awe in ways that tradition and hierarchy had never achieved. Emperor Krillak himself, observing the reports, felt the stirrings of respect mingled with caution. One human had demonstrated that underestimated intelligence and adaptability could challenge the very foundation of his empire. Lysera noted the shift in the council's demeanor, understanding that history was being rewritten by a mortal who had once been laughed at. Beyond the council, Kale's victories inspired entire colonies and systems. Refugees, traders, and volunteer forces began organizing to support human-led initiatives, providing intelligence, technology, and manpower. Systems once oppressed by the coalition saw hope for the first time in decades. Kale's presence became a symbol, a reminder that strength was not measured solely by size, lineage, or technology, but by the ability to observe, adapt, and act decisively in the face of overwhelming odds. Lysera realized that Kale's influence would persist long after the battles had ended, shaping strategy, morale, and even the philosophical understanding of strength across the galaxy. The remnants of the coalition fled into uncharted regions, their morale shattered and their command structure dismantled. Every subsequent attempt to regroup or strike against human-led forces failed, for the legend of Kale had spread faster than any fleet. stories of the human who walked alone into battle, who turned disadvantage into victory, and who inspired courage in allies, became a cornerstone of training, lore, and cultural identity among both humans and alien observers. Where once humans had been dismissed, now they were respected, studied, and even feared. Kale had not merely survived, he had changed the galaxy's perception of humanity forever. Lysera, walking with Kale among the repaired and rebuilt stations, observed how he interacted with soldiers, engineers, and civilians alike. He did not seek praise or admiration, yet all eyes followed him with a mixture of respect and trust. Children played near his ship, veterans sought his guidance, and alien commanders consulted him reluctantly, but earnestly. Kale's presence reshaped relationships, alliances, and the very framework of interstellar politics. He had proven that one mortal, armed with intellect, courage, and adaptability, could alter the course of empires, and the galaxy would never again underestimate humanity. In the quiet moments after the battles, Lysera spoke with him privately. "You've changed everything," she said softly, her voice reflecting awe, gratitude, and a hint of disbelief. Kale's expression remained calm, measured, but there was a depth in his eyes that conveyed the weight of responsibility he had carried and the victories he had won. "I did what had to be done," he replied simply, yet his words carried the unspoken truth that humanity's underestimated qualities, adaptability, ingenuity, courage were forces that could not be contained or ignored. The Empire, once rigid and arrogant, now incorporated human strategies, insights, and innovations into its doctrines. Ships were redesigned to favor flexibility over sheer power. Tactics emphasized adaptability over brute force, and councils began consulting humans in ways that would have been unthinkable before Kale's rise. Across colonies and systems, human influence grew not through domination but through inspiration, demonstrating that intelligence, courage, and determination could reshape the destiny of entire civilizations. That as the suns set over the frontier worlds, Kale stood among his allies, looking out at fleets returning from their victorious patrols, systems celebrating survival, and civilizations inspired by his actions. Lysera remained at his side, understanding fully that what they had witnessed was more than a series of battles. It was the demonstration of humanity's true potential. The armor that had once been ridiculed was now a symbol of perseverance, ingenuity, and the courage to stand alone when the odds were impossibly stacked. One mortal had walked into battle, and the galaxy had trembled. The human's legacy extended beyond strategy or military victories. Stories of Kale's courage, ingenuity, and adaptability spread to generations of humans and aliens alike, teaching that strength was not dictated by size, numbers, or appearance but by intelligence, resilience, and the willingness to act decisively. He had proven that even a single human could reshape the fate of entire empires, that courage and ingenuity could challenge what was thought invincible, and that humanity's underestimated qualities were forces to be reckoned with across the stars. Kale's journey, from a ridiculed figure in simple armor to the architect of galactic victories, concluded not with triumphalism but with quiet authority. He had shown the galaxy that humanity, far from fragile, possessed the skill, courage, and adaptability to stand as equals among the stars. Lysera, observing him, realized that the true power of humans was not in weapons, ships, or fleets, but in the indomitable spirit that Kale embodied, a force that could shake stars, change the course of empires, and inspire generations to come. The coalition's defeat was complete, the empire secured, and humanity's place in the galaxy had been irrevocably transformed by one mortal who had dared to stand alone. And so, the human who had once been laughed at, dismissed, and underestimated walked among the stars, his armor battered but his spirit unbroken, having proven that courage, ingenuity, and the refusal to yield could command the respect of the galaxy itself. The stars had shaken, the empire had endured, and the legacy of humanity had been etched across the cosmos. One mortal had done what no empire had thought possible. He had walked into battle alone, faced overwhelming odds, and emerged as a symbol of the indomitable potential of mankind.